Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today, we have a lot to cover, including the NBA Draft Round 1, which took place last night. We'll talk about everything that occurred there, the big risers, big fallers, biggest surprise pick of the draft, and go over what I thought was a wild actual Round 1, as well as sprinkling in some breaking news from Round 2 that is currently going on right now. In segment 2, we'll talk a little bit about Bronny James. Son of LeBron James is currently eligible to be drafted, has not yet been drafted. We are about halfway through the second round. There was actually just a report 2 minutes ago from Bob Myers on ESPN that said Rich Paul, his agent, is calling teams that aren't named the Lakers and Suns and saying, do not draft Bronny James. We'll talk about if that even is going to matter at all, if the Suns or the Lakers are going to end up drafting Bronny James here when their picks come around in just a little bit. And then we'll talk about some signings that took place last night, including OG Anunoby signing a massive 5-year, $212 million deal to stay with the Knicks, completing what that Mikal Bridges trade probably had in the mind of the Knicks front office there. We'll talk about what that means for the rest of the Knicks offseason. And then we will talk about Jamal Murray, who also signed, in principle, a extension to stay in Denver. So that's all the basketball we'll talk about. And then we're going to continue our NFL preview and reviews, talking about the Washington Commanders here today. We're almost done with the NFC East. We're going to talk about the Commanders, talk about their offseason, give them a grade, and then we're going to go game by game, go over their schedule and everything in the last segment. So stick around for all of that. We'll get a record and game predictions. But before we get into the NBA, remember that if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Leave a tip or donation with a message in it. That message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Go and throw it in the chat. I'll get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking around and talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. But like I was saying, we are going to get into the round 1 of the NBA draft. And what an interesting round 1 it was. From drama in the first overall pick to some players that fell a lot further than we thought they would. Trades. The Wizards had 3 picks in the first round after some trades were made. Some draft day trades, moving players around. So we will talk about all of that. And why don't we just start off right there at that number 1 overall pick? There was lots of speculation of who the Hawks were going to take at number 1, if they were going to trade out of that number 1 spot. They end up selecting Zachary Rissachet out of France, the 6'9", 195-pound Frenchman, has a bunch of question marks surrounding him, right? He's not your prototypical number 1 overall pick that you expect. There's a lot of weaknesses to his game, but you have to remember that he's still incredibly young. He is going to develop. And if he can develop in the NBA with the Hawks, this could be a good pick. But as he is right now, it's going to be a guy that struggles a little bit in almost every aspect of the game, but has that upside. You know, his athleticism is kind of in the middle. His defense is kind of in the middle. His playmaking it's okay. But he needs to develop these skills. And if he can do it with the Hawks, this pick will work out, right? This is a pick that has the potential to be a very successful pick in the first round of the NBA draft. But there's no guarantee that this will work out. And that's kind of the theme with this entire draft class. Now, that being said, Alex Sarr going number 2 overall to the Wizards is a pick I really like. He was my favorite player in this draft. He was the guy that I thought would go number 1 overall. He practically forced his way to the Wizards at this point. So, you know, it felt like it was bound to happen anyway. but it was still a knockout pick. He's a 7-footer who can shoot. Great defense right away. His length is going to be huge for the Wizards. Teddy Belcher says the Kyle Flipowski pick to Utah at 32 was a great pick, and I absolutely agree. Getting some value like that in the second round, especially if you're Utah, who honestly just taking best available after what they did in the first round, taking uh, taking Cody Williams, who again still has a lot of development to do here. He's an upside kind of guy that they got in the first round, that top 10 pick. But getting Flipkowski there, Flipowski. That name is getting all caught up in my mouth. I apologize. Getting him there at 32, top of the second round, is a great value pick. And really, in a draft like this, all you're trying to do is get good value. And especially in a team like Utah, with the situation not being incredibly, high tier, right? They got Lauri Markkanen, but outside of that, there isn't really a core that I feel they can be competitive with. So just getting guys in the building is going to be huge. Getting that Duke star is definitely helpful. But anyway, continuing on with that first round, and we'll talk a little bit more about the second round as we are constantly getting these live updates later on in the show. But the big story of the first round is there were some interesting picks, right? The top five. The top four kind of went like we expected, right? We got the two Frenchmen at the top. We had Reed Shepherd go 3 and Stephen Castle go to UConn at 4. And then at 5, the Pistons made an interesting choice. They draft Ron Holland II out of G League Ignite. He had a little bit of struggles this season, being in the G League Ignite program. He was struggling with his decision making. He's still young, and a lot of these kind of head scratching picks are upside. Same thing with the Frenchman that went after him to the Hawks. It's high upside moves for these guys. But Zach Edey went 9 to the Grizzlies here, and that was another big question in this draft. Where would Zach Edey go? How high would Zach Edey go in this draft? He ends up going top 10 to the Grizzlies at 9, and I like that fit. The Grizzlies, they have Ja Morant. If he can stay healthy and out of trouble, that is a team that is instantly going to be a lot better, is instantly going to be in that playoff, at least conversation, right? And adding a 7-footer like Edey, a 2-time, player of the year in college basketball, it's going to be, it's a great addition for them. If he can just improve his movement, and I know Purdue didn't ask too much of him, right? So we haven't really seen his full potential. He didn't need to do it, but he feels more like more of a complete player than just a 7-foot guy that can't really move, right? It feels like he's got a little bit more in him than, a guy like a Taco Fall did a couple years ago, whose gimmick was, hey, I'm super tall, right? And that can work for a lot of players in the NBA, but I think Edey has a chance of really working out. He ends up going 9 here, but the big story of the first round is the Lakers getting Dalton Knecht at pick 17. Knecht was mocked. I hadn't seen him mocked outside of the top 10 the entire time. I hadn't seen him get past 8 even the entire lead up to the draft. He ends up falling all the way down to 17 with the Lakers, and my God, is that a great pick for them. The Lakers are a team that needed quality depth, needed a guy that could spread the floor and shoot, and he might be the best pure scorer in this draft, right? His, defense isn't going to blow your mind, right? He's not going to send you out of this world with his defense, but his shot making and his scoring are awesome. And adding that to a Lakers team that already has one of the better defenders in the league in Anthony Davis, Maybe LeBron James comes back again. He still hasn't said what he's doing with his player option. He has until the 29th to decide that. So that is coming up soon. But adding Dalton Connect and more scoring, being able to have, more guys you can rely on to score the basketball than just a 41-year-old LeBron James and Anthony Davis, who is getting up there in age. So it's going to be I think that was a great pick for them there. Real quick before we continue, we actually have some breaking news. Outside of the world of basketball. It's in the world of the NFL. I know we haven't talked about it, but the NFL is in the middle of a lawsuit for Sunday Ticket. And if you guys haven't heard about it, basically they were telling Sunday Ticket how to sell it. They weren't letting them sell it as an antitrust suit. But they were just ordered, breaking news just now, to pay $4.7 billion in that case. So if you had Sunday Ticket during, I believe it was the early 2000s when it first came out, you sign up for this, you're entitled to part of that $4.7 billion. So there's your breaking news for you. But getting back to the NBA round one, and there were a lot of question marks. This was a kind of draft where you weren't quite sure where a lot of these guys would go. There's so many high upside guys that in this draft kind of fell. You had Rob Dillingham go 8 to the Spurs, and I want to talk about the Spurs draft just a little bit because I think they kind of knocked it out of the park in the first round. You obviously want to build around Victor Wembanyama, right? And adding a tall defensive guard in Stephen Castle who can run that pick and roll, and a great playmaker in Rob Dillingham. Adding those two together and pairing them with Victor Wembanyama is going to be huge. That's going to instantly help them on the defensive end. The Spurs were a team that was not good at defense at all outside of Victor Wembanyama. They were one of the worst defensive teams in all of basketball if you take him out of the picture there. But you add Castle, who's going to instantly help that, and the playmaking ability, a true point guard in Rob Dillingham, a guy that, can spread the rock. And that's really what they were missing. They get the guy that they need to move the ball around, get it to Wemby, run that offense. And I think this was an incredible draft for the Spurs. Obviously, when you have 2 picks in the top 10, you kind of have to knock it out of the park, but pairing those 3 young guys together to grow for a long time, that could be, I see the vision. I see it working out very well in the future. But let me know what you thought was the best pick of the first round. So far, I think it's Dalton Connect going 17. I mean, that is just a steal. I had no idea he was going to get out of the top 10. But anyway, in our next segment, we're going to talk a little bit more about round 2, specifically about Bronny James, as he still has yet to be drafted, and we are halfway through the second round. There was a report that came out 2 minutes before we went live about him and what his agent was saying to all these teams, so we will talk about all of that and more with the NBA draft coming up next here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.